So I'm real sorry that I have not had a lot of time to get videos done. Life's a little busy, but I still wanted to do my best and worst films list of 2018. So this video will be the best. We'll start with the good ones first. Now, of course, this is just based on the movies I saw this year. I didn't get to see everything I wanted to see. Just looking at a list I made for myself, I didn't get to see The Young Karl Marx, German film. Have not seen Roma yet. I know I could just pull it up on Netflix at any time, but still haven't had a chance. The Hate U Give, didn't get a chance to see. First Man, and House That Jack Built. All movies I wanted to see for 2018, still have not as of yet. But I did still see a lot of movies. I worked at the movie theater through mid to late April. I ended up quitting the week before Avengers Infinity War came out, so I didn't have to deal with those crowds. So I had free movies all through then. Last free movie I saw was Isle of Dogs. And then after that I had MoviePass, back when MoviePass still worked. So from late April until the very last weekend of July, the weekend Mission Impossible Fallout came out, MoviePass covered everything I needed to see, so that was great. Then MoviePass started to suck, and it would only cover 3 movies a month. So worked around those, paid for some movies at Alamo Drafthouse, because we got an Alamo Drafthouse now. Don't mind paying for that one, it's a really good theater. My favorite to go to when I get a chance. And then they also limited, like, what movies you could see. They put showtimes available you could check into, but unless you got to the theater right when it opened, the showtimes disappeared later. It became very inconvenient to use MoviePass. Looked into Cinemia, was a scam. Looked into AMC Stubbs A-List, but the closest AMC, or the most convenient for me, is about 15 minutes from where I work and half an hour from where I live. It's not as convenient when I have a Regal down the road, but Regal is not wanting to do a subscription plan as of yet, or perhaps not at all. If worse comes to worse, I'll just bite the bullet, drive further on, and use AMC, because movies get expensive and I like seeing lots of fucking movies. So that's how that went, but I've still seen quite a bit of movies since then. So anyway, without further ado, I do have a full 10 for the best list, so let's start with that. 10 is going to be Unsane, the Steve Soderbergh movie. Opened early in the year, filmed all with like an iPhone 7 video camera. Last act of the movie gets a little cliche, but I really did like the movie. The movie has some nice commentary about the private healthcare industry, so it has a little bit of politics in there, but it's also this sort of stalking thriller from this woman's point of view as the victim. And it's really keyed into the whole, like, Me Too movement and awareness of, you know, toxic men kind of thing who think they're altruistic when they're not in their obsessions kind of thing. It's got a good is she crazy, is she not thing for a little while. It doesn't do anything particularly original with that, it's just executed really, really well. Claire Foy is great in the lead role. The guy from Blair Witch Project, Josh, is the villain of the movie. I don't think I've seen him in a movie since Blair Witch. I probably haven't, just forgot it. But he's really good as, like, the main... He finds the right balance of, like, realistic creepy and not, like, movie creepy. So I really like that movie. Thought it was really underrated. A lot of people just kind of dismissed it. They didn't think it was inventive enough, but I really dug it, so that was number 10. Number 9 is going to be Widows, by Steve McQueen, and screenplay written by Gillian Flynn, who also is a novelist. She wrote Gone Girl, Sharp Objects, forgetting the other one, but it was turned into a not-so-good movie with Charlize Theron. Widows is like a throwback to, like, old-fashioned crime dramas. The kind you saw a lot in the 90s. I was thinking of, like, Heat with Michael Mann. Not so much in style, but just as far as, like, storyline and ambiance. As far as that genre, you don't see a lot of movies that are quite like that right now. I mean, there's plenty of movies about crime or action or, you know, stuff like that. But this one has really dark, has some social commentary, some of it's beating you over the head, some of it's not so much. Great acting with an ensemble cast, interesting twist to make it sort of focused on female characters who would otherwise be sidelined in movies like this. You know, like a Heat or a Carlito's Way or something like that, but they take, like, center stage. It was just a really good throwback to movies we don't really see that much anymore. And it was really smart, it was well executed. The performances were terrific, and I'm surprised the movie just didn't get as many accolades as it probably deserved to, and maybe because it's a genre piece, so it just kind of fell under the wayside with your normal, like, prestige dramas and stuff. I know the audience that I went to see the movie with didn't really care for it. There was a guy next to me snoring, kept falling asleep. I think someone else down the aisle was falling asleep. So I think they tried to market it as like a mainstream movie. They were probably trying to market it to the same people who go to see like Gerard Butler action movies. Like he had one with, you know, Jay-Z or one of the rappers early in 2018 or something like that. But it worked really, really well, and I really, really enjoyed it. Number 8 is going to be Hereditary. Hereditary is one of those sort of artsy, art house horror movies, kind of like The Witch or It Comes at Night, that mainstream audiences really hate, but film buffs tend to like, and film buffs who also transcend into horror buffs like. But maybe people who just like straight horror might think it's too artsy for them. It fits into that weird niche. We usually get 1 or 2 of these movies a year. Critics love it. It hits the festival circuit, and the festival audiences love it because they're film geeks and horror geeks. Then it comes into the mainstream, maybe makes a profit, maybe it doesn't. But the mainstream audiences who'd rather see some bullshit like The Conjuring end up not liking it. But Hereditary was really well marketed, where, you know, there's a twist at the end of the first act. It's maybe not a twist, except that the marketing makes you think the movie's going to go one way, and then that completely shatters your illusion, so you don't know where the movie's going to go. Very well acted, Toni Collette's great, extremely well directed. For a while, I didn't know where the story precisely was going, until maybe like the late second act. Really, really well done movie, and, you know, movies like this where they're really creepy, and they have great performances, and they're a bit more stylish, but they're still like kind of artsy and art house. For some reason, they just don't connect with audiences when they're in theaters, and then finally the audience might find it on video. But, you know, like The Witch was great. I liked It Comes at Night. I understand that that's sort of a mixed thing. But, you know, in a year where people liked A Quiet Place, which was a decent movie but had many, many flaws with its universe and world building, I don't know why Hereditary didn't pick up with enough mainstream accolades, but, you know, again, the theater I saw it like opening Thursday night. They were all just kind of bored and clucking, and they found the ending because there's naked people and they're laughing. It's like, grow the fuck up, you idiots. You know, go see fucking Truth or Dare or some shit or something. You know, not everything has to be mainstream Blumhouse stuff. Nothing against Blumhouse. They made some very good movies too, but, you know. So I really liked Hereditary. This was like 2018's art house horror hit, and I liked it. Number 7 is going to be Three Identical Strangers. 2018 was a pretty good year for documentaries at the box office. You had stuff like Won't You Be My Neighbor, the Mr. Rogers documentary, which I also really liked. You had RBG, which is good. It's a little bit of a, hey Carl, it's a little bit of a hagiography and a little kind of a puff piece, but still a very good film nonetheless. And, Carl's cute. But Three Identical Strangers I thought was the best of the documentaries I saw in the theater. And I don't have as much time to watch documentaries as I'd like to. Netflix has done some really good stuff with that, as have the other streaming services. He's cute. So, but what I liked about Three Identical Strangers is that the movie starts out as just kind of being a fun little story, sort of like, oh, that's kind of funny. They find out they're triplets and they don't realize it because they're all adopted and separated at birth. And it starts as sort of a light sort of like, oh, this is a funny little anecdote behind the scenes of like you know, what would have been maybe a tabloid story, but sort of a feel-good think piece you see on the local news. And then it gets deeper and more sinister, and it becomes quite a meditation on medical ethics and the difference between nature and nurture, and is kind of shocking and haunting and makes you really angry toward the end of it. And it's a really, really good movie in the fact that it unfolds like this, because after the end of the first act, I'm like, alright, this is a cute story, but why is this a movie? Why isn't this like a half-hour special on something? But then it reveals itself to be feature film worthy, and man, this is a story. You can't believe that this happened, and it's really interesting. you know, we don't have all the answers we're ever going to get about, like, the study behind it or the story that goes on with it, the psychological thing that was going on, but wow, it's it's a hell of a story, and yeah, it was the documentary I saw in the theater that kind of affected me more. Because Won't You Be My Neighbor, great film, makes you feel good, RBG, you know, if you're someone who's politically inclined in my direction, and I'm even further left than that woman is, Carl's here. Meet Carl. Then you're gonna like that. But Three Identical Strangers was definitely the strongest of those, and definitely my favorite of those for 2018. Number 6 is going to be Suspiria. So this is, I guess, another art house horror movie, doesn't blow up the box office. There wasn't as much of a backlash to this one, which is kind of surprising, because it's sort of a very loose remake of a Dario Argento film, which is considered a classic. I do like the original Argento Suspiria. It's a great use of color and stuff, but not a classic horror film or even a horror film from the 70s that I'm quite attached to. And so I might be in the minority, and forgive me for saying this, but I actually think this remake or reimagining or what have you is a lot better. For one, it's a movie with characters at the dance studio that actually has dance sequences. But it's really, I mean, to tie in sort of extremist political movements and make it a period piece set around the time that the first movie was made, because the first movie is contemporaneous, it delves a bit more into the psychology or the setup of the coven. You know, it's one of those movies where, you know how Kristen Stewart was good in Panic Room, and then she became famous for the Twilight movies, but she sucked in them because everything sucked in them, and then later on she went to show that she could actually act in other movies, like Still Alice and stuff. Seeing Dakota Johnson in this movie, I mean, she doesn't have a chance to really do a lot of acting, you know, dialogue and that kind of thing, but she shows some great physicality in some roles, and really sort of throws herself into it, so you see that, okay, this woman can actually act when she's not making fucking 50 Shades of Grey bullshit. Mia Goth does a good job in it. Obviously, Tilda Swinton playing 3 roles in this, I think. 2 under heavy makeup is the standout. But this movie, the score is great. The score by the Radiohead guy was Tom York. It's extremely well directed. I know some people are going to be confused by it, or they're going to, or certainly the third act, the climax of the movie is pretty over the top with gore and nudity and a bombastic score and red filters, and it's probably a little much. Definitely not a mainstream movie. This is definitely very artsy as well. But it really, really worked, and by the end, I mean, there's some parts of it that are actually really powerful, dramatic parts. And maybe there's not as much character development as I'd like for some of the characters, Dakota Johnson's main character for one, but the movie really works, and for a 2.5-hour, extremely artsy horror movie, you know, it packs a punch. It has its gore and its disturbing moments and some really icky visuals, and it was definitely probably the best horror movie of the year, even though it's, you know, not a movie you definitely put on to, like, scare or jump scare or anything like that. So while I did like Hereditary very much, Hereditary is definitely, even though that's artsy and not very mainstream, that is more mainstream than the Suspiria reboot is. But Suspiria, I thought, was just, you know, a couple echelons better, so that gets higher up on my list. Number 5 is going to be The Favorite, by the guy who made the very creepy Dogtooth and Killing of a Sacred Deer, which is a very odd movie that I also like. The stilted line delivery, not sure if it works in that movie or if it's good in spite of that, but he was going for something. I like The Favorite because I tend to like things that have class analysis or attacks on the class system. And The Favorite is a period piece that doesn't feel like a period piece. I'm not a big fan of period pieces from, like, you know, this type of era. Like, Scorsese's The Age of Innocence, that kind of thing. In Birch and Ivory movies, not a big fan of those. Never watched Downton Abbey or anything like that. But this one feels very modern, and it's sort of about the jockeying between these two women to be the favorite subject of the queen, and about you know, the different inner workings of the main party and the opposition party and what the Queen's gonna do and the cattiness and the manipulation and all of that stuff. And it's a really fun movie with, you know, Emma Stone this is probably the best performance she's given. I know she won an Oscar for La La Land, but this one's technically better. Rachel Weisz, who hasn't really had much of a chance to shine in her recent career, does a great job. Olivia Colman, or even the guy from X-Men who used to date Jennifer Lawrence. I can't remember his name. I think he played Iceman or something. He's one of the main characters in this, and he actually shows, like, oh, the guy can act. He does a really good job with his role. Extremely well-directed. Probably the most beautiful cinematography this year. The lighting, hands down, is this movie. The natural light and using it. And the movie feels wider and more expansive than it is. There's actually only a couple real rooms in this giant, like, mansion that they shoot in. But really, just a gorgeous-looking movie. The lighting and is stunning, and the costumes and the sets. This is definitely the best-looking movie, and if it doesn't win Best Cinematography at the Oscars this year, someone was robbed, because this is, like, using fisheye lenses so that it doesn't feel like a stodgy period piece, but feels modern. It really injects new life into the genre, and I was immensely impressed by this movie. It's very, very good. Number 4 is going to be a movie no one remembers now, Thoroughbreds. Came out around March. It was the last movie Anton Yelchin made before he died. And this was it feels like a play. I think it started off as a play, maybe. But it's two girls, one who is very flat and emotionless, and one who seems to be bordering on psychopathy, and how they deal with each other and with one of the ladies' kind of asshole stepdad. And it feels very... I mean, I think it was... The advertisements said it was like a mix between American Psycho and Heathers, and I wouldn't quite go that far with those two movies. It certainly feels Bret Easton Ellis-like. Maybe more Rules of Attraction meets Mean Girls, maybe a little bit better, but it's definitely along those lines. Anna Taylor-Joy, I believe her name is. She's from Split and The Witch. She seems to be becoming this new, like, scream, like, art house scream queen. Just saw her in Glass tonight. She does a really great job, and forgive me if I forget the other actress's name. I've seen her in other stuff too. I think she was in Ready Player One last year as well. It's a really, really good movie, and it's the kind of movie that I really hope gets a cult following, because it's just really strong. It's got really clever dialogue. The characters are really interesting, and it's the kind of movie that I love, but nobody went to see this fucking thing. And it seemed like the advertisement was good. I mean, maybe it just came out at the wrong time of year. When I went to see it, it was playing in one of the 4 theaters at the 20 theater movie theater down the road from me that doesn't have the recliner seating, so it was just free seating. I think I was in there with 2 other dudes. It's a shame that this movie has been sort of forgotten and passed over when it's an excellent, excellent fucking movie. And if there's a movie from this list, I think this is the one that's most in danger of completely being disregarded or forgotten at the end of the year, when people think of movies of 2018, and this is one you should really rent, give it like a red box or something, give it a shot, because this is a movie that deserves to be seen. It is funny, and it is really well done. Number 3 is going to be Annihilation. A movie that the studio had no faith in, so they sold the foreign rights to Netflix. And you can see why, because it's fucking intelligent. And when science fiction is arguably the most popular genre at the box office. If you look at the top grossing movies of all time, most of them are gonna at least tangentially fit in with sci-fi. Star Wars, Avatar, stuff like that, E.T. But a lot of those, I mean, forgiveness for some of those movies, many of them are very good, but they're more about spectacle than they are about intelligence or actual conceptual science fiction, the science fiction of ideas. Like, I usually tell people my favorite science fiction film is Gattaca, one that's not really about spectacle, but it's about actual ideas and potential science and the social ramifications of it. That kind of, like, Isaac Asimov type stuff. That's the kind of sci-fi that really fires my brain. I mean, I like spectacle stuff. You know, one of my favorite movies is RoboCop. That's a spectacle thing, but it also has social commentary, which is something I also like in my sci-fi. Same with, like, Starship Troopers and stuff, both Verhoeven. But Annihilation is a very intelligent film that's not about like an evil threat. It's just sort of about passive science or passive biology taking over and things like that, and the destruction of the self and what it is to be self, and the death of the environment, and it's sort of, just because something is against you in science doesn't mean it's evil. Science is amoral as opposed to immoral. Also has really creepy scenes of like Cronenbergian body horror, but it has really great visuals of a shimmer. There's that bear scene, which is some of the most that was probably the most suspenseful, intense scene of any movie this year, is them with that bear that can scream with a human scream. If you saw that movie, you know what I'm talking about. And as far as like being in that high concept, almost Stanley Kubrick-esque science fiction, those movies are few and far between, and when they come across, they usually cost a lot of money, and then they don't make any money. So it's plain to see why no one went to see it at the theater. Plus, if it was streaming on Netflix, it would have been easily pirated from torrent sites and stuff at that point, so that would have bitten into its domestic box office as well. But it's a really, really great movie and a really great science fiction film that, they'll probably be studying in science fiction film classes in film schools for a while. And it's the second film that Alex Garland has both written and directed. He was just a screenwriter and he moved into writing and directing with Ex Machina, which is a great movie. I think it was in my top list of the year that came out. That did pretty well thanks to its low budget. Annihilation took more money, and because of that it kind of lost, unfortunately, but excellent, excellent movie if you like science fiction with actual, themes and intelligence, and that's actually trying to say something, or is trying to speculate about scientific concepts, but also is fucking creepy as hell, and very disturbing in its own way. This is the movie for you, and it's really, really fucking good. Number 2 is going to be First Reformed. If you've watched my channel for a while, or if you know me, you know I'm a huge Ethan Hawke fan. Finally got to see this movie through Amazon Prime. It didn't really open anywhere near me, or if it did, I didn't have a chance to go see it. This is an interesting movie that sort of examines different concepts. It examines how human beings are dealing with the sort of slow motion inevitability of our destruction through climate change. It deals with sort of the intersection between religious faith and radical politics, and why one form of radical politics can be fueled by religion, but one form of radical politics can be a-religious, but then how radicalization to one party or to one ideology doesn't cut off the possibility of another one. Like, in the United States, we mostly see radical religiosity as being right-wing, blowing up abortion clinics and that sort of thing, or, if we're not dealing with, Islamic terrorism and stuff. But this is a movie about how you could easily follow the sort of leftist principles of Christianity and take that into a different side of radicalization, but it also examines whether radicalization is bad, whether radicalization is perhaps what's necessary in some cases, and what the cost of that is, and the cost-benefit analysis of doing what's right long-term versus short-term morality, or if morality can even be measured in short versus long-term, or if it's sort of cosmic. I think different people of different backgrounds are going to consider this film differently, whether, atheist, super left-wing communist guy views this movie as opposed to social conservative Lutheran or something like that. Regardless of how you take the film on an ideological level, or even what the film's ideological intention is, which I guess could be also up for debate as far as where the film ends up at, it's a very interesting character study of sort of the main character, this Lutheran priest who's kind of sort of hasn't really lost his faith, but has lost his hope, or has lost his, not capital F faith as in a religion, but lowercase f as in faith to live, almost. And and how he sort of is beaten down by the world. It's very, Paul Schrader wrote and directed this. He also wrote Taxi Driver. The main character of this, First Reformed, is nowhere near as unhinged as Travis Bickle is. But it's interesting to see sort of the slow descent of, Paul Schrader's kind of made this his theme, the slow descent of the lonely male against the social forces around him. And seeing how this character gets from point A to point B is really great to watch. And for someone who's a huge fan of Ethan Hawke, this is one of his absolute best performances. What he does in this movie can sometimes be subtle, but he really inhabits this character, and you see a progression from scene to scene. And I don't think this movie was shot in sequence, but it does a really great job of seeing this man sort of get pushed in different directions slowly and slowly until his morality as far as what is ultimately right versus the short-term morality of whether it's right or wrong to do this particular act start to come to a head so that he doesn't know what's right and wrong. And what's right and wrong might not be as black and white as you would think. And movies that make you think about concepts like that, or that take something like it would be very easy to make a movie about an atheist left-wing environmental terrorist, or it'd be very easy to make one about a right-wing evangelical Christian who wants to blow up abortion clinics or murder gay people or something. But to take this concept and take it in the direction it does in order to examine other areas rather than following what would have been the easier path or the more cliched path is really difficult, and it's done in a superb and almost brilliant way in this movie. Excellent film. I saw it on Amazon Prime. If you didn't get a chance to see it, highly recommend it. My favorite film of 2018 was Sorry to Bother You. I don't quite know why this movie's being forgotten at the end of the year best of lists. For some reason people are saying Black Klansman should be, even though that film, both films deal with race and racism in American society with that, but I feel that Sorry to Bother You, as far as being better made and more entertaining, is also a bit deeper in its analysis than Black Klansman, which is very surface and probably has some problematic stuff with it too. And it certainly takes the road of least resistance. It is trying to be mainstream, and so it gives the audience a very easy, like, hick racist or bad message. Whereas Sorry to Bother You is well, it's written and directed by Boots Riley, a self-described communist who is part of like a rap hip-hop group. This is his first movie, and it's a very surrealistic, sort of, not quite David Lynch, but about like when Cronenberg made Naked Lunch type of surrealism. And it is a complete evisceration of modern-day American capitalism, while also dealing with the class analysis, the race analysis. It's about unionization and, a neo-feudalism under, like, Amazon-type companies, and it tackles the cult of personality around some immoral, like, superstar CEOs. Like, there's an Elon Musk-type character in here played by Armie Hammer. I don't know how to describe this movie without getting into spoilers to describe how brilliant it is, but this movie is original and visceral and alive and kinetic, and I don't see movies like this that often, and I'm not just talking about the extremely left-wing message, which of course is going to appeal to me, but even aside from that, this movie is alive with ideas and freshness, and perhaps that's because it's from someone who has never made a movie before and who struggled to make the screenplay for a long time because of its subject matter, and probably only was able to get the funding and get the people in it because he's famous in this other realm where he's well regarded. And for a movie to not just have a message, any movie can have a message, but to be executed in this lively, extremely funny, fresh way. This is probably the funniest movie I saw of the year, let alone being the most weird and surreal and fucked up and brilliant film. So of all the movies I saw in 2018, and 2018 had a surprising number of really good movies. This was a pretty strong year for movies overall. Some other people disagree with me, but I saw it. There were actually other movies I really liked that didn't make this list, and there are some years where I'm struggling to get to 10 movies that I think should be considered a best. But Sorry to Bother You was the film that was like, yes, this is hands down the best movie I've seen this year of all of these. I think it's streaming on Hulu if you have it. Otherwise, video, DVD, all that good stuff, it's available. So, yeah, 2018, strong year. I still saw a lot of movies, despite not seeing them all for free anymore. And that's the 10 favorite, ranked in order. Hopefully I'll get this up, and around roughly the same time I'll also have my list of the films I hated the most of 2018.